Hi, Patricia Stallworth here with the Biz and Money Network. Want to find out what it takes to be a badass entrepreneur? Stay tuned. Patricia Stallworth here again with my guest, Cecilia Lynch. Cecilia is the CEO and Chief Strategist at Focused Momentum, a strategic planning firm. She's the author of Strategic Focus, The Art of Strategic Thinking, and she's been featured in numerous offline and online publications, including FinTechRanking.com, and she was recently voted a badass entrepreneur by Idea Mitch. Welcome, Cecilia.
Hi, Patricia. Thanks for having me.
So I'm not going to mince words. I'm going to jump right in with my first question. What makes you such a badass?
Well, I think probably starts with my Irish heritage. I'm sure that's part of it because the Irish is definitely a passionate bunch. But I think the reason why the handle resonates with so many people, badass handle resonates, is because I was born with a really quick and dyslexic mind. And it really allows me to listen to a wide variety of input very quickly and see patterns in it. And when I work with my clients or, am in the process of developing strategy, I often reach kind of a crystal clear understanding of the situation and the ways in which we should think about things in advance of the people around me. And I'm also, a really strong, independent woman. So I think that also kind of connects with that phrase badass.
All right. Now, just so that we're all on the same page, can you provide us with a quick definition of strategic thinking?
Yeah. So strategic thinking is really the ability to start with the end and then work backwards to ensure that what you're doing is aligned with, your ultimate vision or what you're ultimately trying to achieve. Okay. So strategic thinking really differs from the discipline and practice of problem solving or even a lot of traditional planning structures because so many of those efforts start with where you are and what are we going to do next? How do we move forward in that next step? And they often or sometimes can get distracted and get off track by some of those distractions and end up going to a place they didn't really want to go and then needed to get back on track. So strategic thinking is really the basis for great strategic planning for organizations, but it's also a discipline that you can use in your personal life. It's really about stopping and not kind of reacting or thinking, how do I solve this problem, but kind of redefining the problem and resetting broader context so that whatever you decide to do is not only going to get you is going to, mean you take that next step, but that next step is going to be heading in the right direction for you.
Okay, that's really interesting. Is strategic thinking, do you think that's something that people are born with, or do you think that's something that can be created?
So I think that some of us who are a bit more intuitive are kind of maybe more naturally oriented to strategic thinking. But even then, you need to learn some disciplines about strategic thinking in order to really apply it. So I think great strategic thinkers are created. I mean, I think some of us come to it a little bit more easily than others, but it definitely is a practice that you can learn.
Well, in doing my own homework for the interview, I read a study that talked about how only a small percentage of executives really rate themselves as effective in developing and executing a company strategy. And with all of the changes that are going on today, like changes in the tax laws and regulations, that's got to put some companies at a real disadvantage. Can you speak to that and what companies can do to be better prepared?
Yeah, I know there's been a lot of research on strategic thinking skills and competencies in executive leadership. And, it's really hard. It's a hard time to kind of set a winning strategy and stick with it. During times of high change, executive teams can do what we call circle the wagons when they go off to decide what to do. And that means really kind of become a lot more insular and exclude people from the process versus include people in the process. And that happens a lot of times because, they're really struggling with the ability to control situations and gain confidence in their decision making. So they kind of have less people involved because they feel like that then will limit the chaos in the conversations. And that's the opposite of what they need to do during times of high change. And we take a different approach to doing strategy and allow those executive teams to take advantage of the talent that they have within their organization that doesn't exist on the executive team. So even though executive teams rate themselves, not as favorably as they could on strategic thinking or the ability to drive strategy, that shouldn't limit them from being successful at that effort. They just need to make sure they have a process in which they find and engage those hidden strategists that they have in the organization. And we really rely on those hidden strategists when we develop strategy with our clients.
So in terms of the hidden strategists that you just talked about, if they're not at the executive level, how do companies typically find these people? Or what are some traits or characteristics that they should be on the lookout for to find them? Because it sounds like they could be the key to really, in some cases, saving the company.
Yeah, sometimes they are actually. So we've been doing this for a while, and there are some things that we see consistently. And when we do our strategic assessments, we do talk to a tremendous amount of people in an effort both to gather information for strategy work, but to find those hidden strategists. And first, they're naturally curious people. So when we conduct interviews with them, they sometimes ask more questions than they, state opinions. They're curious about the process. They're curious about kind of what other people do. They're just really curious people. So they tend to come at engagements with that inquisitive mind. They're also great listeners. So not only do they ask questions, but they're listening a lot. And you see this mostly in the group settings where we do large group conversations, and they're really intently taking in information and listening. And I don't mean to say that they're all extra introverts who don't talk a lot. They sometimes talk a lot, but they're really listening. And I think this builds on their curiosity. What we see is that they're not, again, stating opinions a lot or advocating for a point of view. They're listening and they're building their thinking. So those are two of the traits. And then another thing is that they tend not to have broad spheres of influence. So this is something that we've noticed over the years is that so they're usually, and that's why we call them hidden strategists, because they're usually in positions in which they have kind of a limited scope. They prefer not to take a broad leadership role, which is why they don't go for positions on the executive committee. They tend to really be happiest when they can drive change and innovate from within. And they may be an individual contributor doing that, or they may be, maybe a manager of a department or a highly influential kind of functional area head. But they tend not to be someone who's looking for, a senior leadership position. They're very bad at politics, and they're wary of it. It drains them. But they also are very deeply passionate about the business. So they're the kind of person that you start a conversation and they can tell you a ton about both the business, it's the market, they study it, and they are very deeply knowledgeable. Again, because they're curious, because they listen well, they are very deeply passionate about the business. So when we start to talk to them and they are kind of endless in terms of the information that they can flow, we think, aha, here's somebody who we're going to significantly leverage. They're going to really help. But then probably one of the most interesting things is that they're women.
Excuse me, did you say they were women?
Yeah, a lot of times, 9 times out of 10, those hidden strategists are women that have been passionate about the business, are naturally curious, are great listeners, and have kind of limited their scope in terms of being visible in the company. And they're women. I mean, it's just interesting to me how many times, and there's been some recent research that kind of underscores this as well. And it certainly wasn't surprising for me to see it. And they're at various levels. I mean, we've seen the women hidden strategists in our client groups be at board levels where they've maybe not been the president of the board, but they're very much people who have been observing, and they really have a clear point of view. And we leverage them, we pull them out. They can also be individual. Like I remember once in one client, there was a woman who was a marketing manager who was doing brilliant things, who had great opinions. And because she was never really invited into an executive teams to kind of engage in conversations, she wasn't tapped in strategy work. And once we discovered her, we brought her into the process, and she was able to really influence a lot of thinking. So that is one of the things that I think is most interesting, is when executive teams go to look to augment their strategic planning capabilities and their strategic thinking processes, they should definitely be looking for people who are curious, great listeners, maybe a little shy to take a broader influence in the organization, but show a deep passion for the industry, and don't be surprised if they're a woman.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. But of course, there is another option, and that is that they could hire a firm like yours to not just help them uncover those strategists in their organization, but also to help them develop a strategy going forward. But to be honest, in doing my research, I didn't hear a lot of good things about the success rates of strategic planning efforts.
Yeah.
How does bringing in an expert like your firm address that, or what is different about your firm?
Yeah. Well, I think that, we've kind of already made the case for why doing it by yourself probably doesn't help. I mean, if you don't have the resources within your executive team to do it, you probably need to find some help. If you don't know how to bring a lot of people into the process, you need to bring in some help. And so, those rates of success are appalling to me, because I think the statistics that I've seen, which are greatly improved in the last 10 years, is that about 85% of the time strategic executives believe that their strategic planning efforts failed. And that shocks me, quite honestly, because we've done analysis on our engagements with our clients over the years, and we've been doing this for 20 years now. And our clients hit their goals a year ahead of plan. So when we do a long-range plan, we expect that we'll be back in 3 to 5 years to update the strategic plan, and we're being called back in, 18 to 24 months to recalibrate, because they've just performed at a stellar level. So those statistics tell me that this circle the wagon thing is real, that people are looking at problem solving versus strategic thinking, and that they need to bring in expertise to help build the right process for them and engage their hidden strategists in what will really be powerful strategic thinking.
Wow. That certainly sounds like worth looking into. The whole world of strategists and strategic thinking and strategic planning can seem a little bit difficult to grasp at sometimes, but I want to thank you for really explaining that aspect of it, and it seems pretty down to earth when you really think about it. This has been a really great interview. I've enjoyed it, but before I let you go, I understand that you have lots of blog posts and even a free ebook on your website that goes into more detail on the topic of strategic thinking. I always like to share resources with my audience. Would you mind sharing a link with us to your free ebook?
You should go to our website at focusmomentum.com. You will see a link to the ebook there. There's also resources, both, as you mentioned, in our blog, and also free resources for quick start kits or tools that you can use, checklists, etc., to actually start to dive into strategic planning on your own or learn about it. And shortly, we're going to be offering some more online courses for individuals wanting to learn more about strategic thinking and how to gain strategic focus so you create the best plans for your organization.
Thank you so much, and I want to say thank you again to my guest, Cecilia Lynch. She is the CEO and Chief Strategist at Focused Momentum. You can learn more about her and her company at focusedmomentum.com. Thanks so much for listening.